Hello everybody and welcome back to my channel. So today I'm doing my top 23 books of 2023, and let me say that I have read over 160 books this year, and it wasn't hard to come up with the 23 books, but it was really hard to order them. I feel pretty confident with my top 23, and I just have really interesting reasons why I rank things the way I rank things and the way I rate things the way I rate things. Sometimes it's something that I connected with. Sometimes I was in a mood and I really needed to read that message that day, so don't read too much into it, but I'm excited to get started. Let me know down below what your top books were for the year and let's get started. Okay, so coming in at number 23 we have Checkmate by Ali Hazelwood. I have a signed copy. First of all, the cover is just absolutely gorgeous. This book really redefined what young adult was to me. I was pretty pleasantly shocked by some of the things that I read in here and the way that it was still considered young adult, but I really liked it. It's about two teenagers and they connect over chess, and also kind of a coming of age story and a getting to know oneself story. So I really recommend it. It's really cute and it's pretty short, but this had been my favorite Ali Hazelwood book so far that I've read. So coming in at number 23 we have a very strong contender. Number 22 is Nora Goes Off Script. This book was super short but also so enjoyable. It is about Nora, who is a screenwriter, and the main actor in one of her films is a really famous guy, and he kind of imposes himself on her and invites himself to stay over at her house, and they fall in love and something happens. And the reason why I really like this book is because it was super unique in concept and super unique in language and what happened, and it kind of redefined what a romance is, and I really liked it. Romance is not my favorite genre to read, but I really enjoyed that book, and for such a short book it's pretty high to be number 22. Number 21 is The 7-Year Slip by Ashley Poston. I recently read this about a month ago. It is a love story with a kind of magical realism element. Every single time the main character steps into her apartment, she slips in the past for 7 years, and she meets someone there that she really liked, but he is also 7 years in the past. And so it was really interesting, and just the descriptions of the writing was really good. It was just quality writing, unique concept, and I love it. Coming in at number 20 we have Morningstar. This is the final book in the Red Rising trilogy. I know there's still more books out in this saga. I have not gotten to them yet. I really kind of wanted to stop reading after Red Rising because I felt like I was just putting in too much effort and wasn't getting anything out of it, but I'm super glad that I continued, because by this book the character development and the plot and just the things that happened and the amount of times my jaw was on the floor was just immaculate. It was so good. I highly recommend if you're looking to branch out and you want to try a sci-fi book. Red Rising by Pierce Brown is a really good way to start. It is super confusing, but such a good payoff by the end, so this definitely makes the list. Okay, coming in at number 19 we have Ignite Me from the Shatter Me series. I read this series in September, and I gotta say it was pretty mid. Like, I wasn't super in love with it, but I understood why people love this series so much when I read Ignite Me. It was so good. The way that the man was written was just so good. I was eating it up, and I still think as a series it is a skippable series. I know that's really controversial, I know, but I didn't really think the series was worth it with that many books. But Ignite Me was so good. Like, I still think about it sometimes. I'll be lying down and I'll think about it. I'll think about Aaron Warner. He's just so good. So that's why it ranked that way. I truly though could not rank it any higher, but it had to be on the list somewhere. Coming in at number 17 we have Two Twisted Crowns by Rachel Gillig. I love this book. I wasn't sure how it was going to happen because this is the second book in the Shepherd King duology, the first one being One Dark Window, and I really loved One Dark Window too. Like, loved that book. But this one came out this year and it was so good. It was just so good. The author added another perspective that we didn't get before, and it was so good. It was like a whole new love story, whole new stakes that were being brought into it, and it was really, really well done. It was super unique, and I truly didn't know how this was going to take place. This book happens right where the last one left off, so I highly recommend, if you haven't heard of it, to read One Dark Window and then get into this book. But it was really good. It was ended really, really, really well, and I really like when authors kind of know where their story is going and they don't drag it out longer than it needs to be. Like, this was a duology, and it was perfect as a duology. Probably could have added another book, but the author like knew, and it's just really good. It's just such a unique point of view, and it made the top 20 this year. Okay, number 16 is The Way I Used to Be by Amber Smith. This book, oh my gosh, I read this in the summer. I didn't know what it was about. I didn't check trigger warning, so definitely check trigger warning for this book and all the other books before you read them. This is about Eden, and she talks about her sexual assault, and it just grabs you from the first page and the first description, and you just feel for her so much. And I've read other books this year kind of about the same topics, but it didn't hit as hard as this one because I think about it all the time. I didn't love the second one that came out about a month ago. I was really disappointed in that, but this one was so good, and she kind of examines herself and why she made the choices that she made, and also it's just so relevant to the world that we live in today and the situations that we face, unfortunately. But this one was written really well, and it did the situation justice. I find that sometimes when books are written about really, really heavy topics, sometimes it doesn't do the character justice, and this book I thought really, really did, because we didn't love all the characters all the time. They were all complicated, and that's how it's supposed to be. So just so good. Okay, number 15 is All In, which is the third book in the Natural series, and this takes place when they go to Las Vegas and solve a case. So if you don't know what the Naturals is, it is a group of teenagers working for the FBI to solve cold cases, and there's a lot that happened in the books before this, and I thought they were good but very forgettable. But the third book is by far my favorite in the entire series, and it's just so good. Like, the things that happen and the case that happens and the stakes that happen in that book is just so good. So highly recommend that series. The third one is just my favorite. Okay, number 14 is The Blood Trader, which is the third and final book of the Prison Healer trilogy. I love the Prison Healer trilogy. It's about a girl who is a healer in a high security prison, and by the third book, so much has happened. Of course, I don't want to give anything away, but you are already so attached to the characters and you're so invested in what is going to happen next. And I genuinely was surprised, because I remember when I read that book, I was getting really frustrated in the things that I was reading and how none of it felt original, and that was really, really original. I didn't guess like half of the stuff that happened, and it felt like the payoff was really there. So highly recommend the Prison Healer trilogy. I don't really hear that many people talking about it. Okay, coming in at 13, we have Yellowface by R.F. Kuang. Now, let me just say, this book is way too expensive, like, compared to other books. This one's like $30 something, $30. It's ridiculous, so let me just say that. But oh my gosh, wow, I didn't know what this book was about. I had read the Poppy War trilogy before I read this, and I really liked that, but this book was so good. It was completely different than anything that she's ever put out before, and it's basically about two authors, and one of them is not successful, but the other one dies, and so she steals her manuscript and publishes it as her own. An overarching theme of just things that go on in the publishing industry, and it sheds a light on so many of those things, but that's honestly not why I liked it. Like, I take things at face value a lot of the times, and just taking this book at face value, it was so entertaining. Like, I was on the edge of my seat the entire time. It's kind of crazy. Like, the things that happen in here are not realistic at all, but it's so good. I know some people don't like it because it feels like a message is being shoved down their throat, and I can totally see why, but I don't care. Like, it was just so entertaining. I read it on a flight home, and I just loved it. So I highly recommend reading it. It was just good. It was very good. Don't make fun of me for number 12, but it is Tom Felton's Behind the Wand book. It's just his memoir, his autobiography, and basically he just talks about his time doing Harry Potter and the struggles he had growing up in the spotlight. And I did not know he went through half of the stuff that he went through. Like, he really struggled with a lot of things, and to have it be brought out so publicly must have been really hard, and it was hard. He wrote about it. But I am just a Draco fan through and through. I love Tom Felton, and I was in England and I saw this and I was like, wow, how fitting. So I picked it up, I read it in a couple of hours, and I love it. I keep it on my TBR cart. I stare at it all the time, like, look at that magical cover. But I highly recommend, if you're a fan of Harry Potter, if you're a fan of Tom Felton, to read it, because it's really good, and it really gives you what you want as a fan. Like, it satisfies everything that you want as a fan. Okay, number 11 is Heartless by Elsie Silver. It is the second book in the Chestnut Springs series and my favorite. It follows Cade, a single dad, and Willa, who ends up being the nanny. And yes, it's cheesy, but it is just wonderful in every way. Like, it's just so good. I remember finishing it and then like thinking about rating it, and then I was like, whoa, I literally cannot rate this anything but 5 stars because it was so good. It was so enjoyable through and through, and it was just perfect. So Heartless, there's really not much to say. It's pretty simple, but it's just good. Like, the way the characters are written and the family banter, which is so good. Okay, now we're in the top 10. Number 10, I'm Glad My Mom Died by Jeanette McCurdy. So good, so shocking. I remember reading, I think with the prologue of the first chapter, she talking about her mom like literally dying, and it was just so good. Which is really good. It's really sad because you have to remember that you're not reading something that's meant to entertain us like it is, but it's also her life. She's telling her story, and her story is just so sad. But I'm really glad that she decided to take things into her own hand and write about her message and her story, because it was so profound and so good, and I thought it was very well done. So number 10, if you haven't read it, what are you doing? You have to go read it. Okay, coming in at number 9, we have Fourth Wing. I didn't even want to include this on my list because I feel like it is such a cliche, but truly it just has to be. Like, I was so enamored. I remember hearing that there was a lot of hype about Fourth Wing, and I didn't really know what it was about. I just jumped into it, and it was so good. It's about a girl that goes to school to become a dragon rider, basically, and it just gave me so many reminiscent great vibes from when I was younger and reading like Divergent and Hunger Games and all of that stuff. And even though the story is not like the same at all, it just felt reminiscent of those vibes, like City of Bones. Like, it just felt so reminiscent to like early mid-2000s dystopian, and even though it's a fantasy, it just felt really good. I didn't love Iron Flame, but Fourth Wing was really good. Okay, coming in at number 8, we have Hot House Flower by Krista and Becca Ritchie. I read the entire Addicted Calloway Sisters series this year, and I loved it. I really did, but this one just stood out. I actually only own this one from all 10 books because I read the entire series on my phone, and then I just had to buy this because I think about Daisy and Reich every single day, and it's just really funny because if a situation like this were to happen in real life, I would probably not support it, but the way it's written, it's just so good, and it makes me believe everything that's being said, and so I buy into it, and it's just beautiful. It's just so good. I highly recommend reading the Addicted Calloway Sisters series. It's really good. It's life-changing. I don't really like romance, but this is really good. This is Daisy and Reich story, and the whole series follows the Calloway sisters and their life, and it's just good. It's just so good. Like, it's just so good. Like, I just love this. It's almost criminal that this is ranking at number 8, which feels kind of low to me, but also remembering that I read over 160 books this year, it's astronomically high. Okay, coming in at number 7 is The Invisible Life of Betty LaRue by V.E. Schwab. I picked this up the same like shopping trip where I picked up The Way I Used to Be, and wow, how great of me to judge books by its cover and being rewarded in the best way possible by having 2 amazing books. This is really good. This is the Barnes & Noble's exclusive edition, so it has like fun little pages. I know I'm probably the last person on the planet to read this book. I don't don't even care because it was just so good. It was so good. This book is about Addie, and she makes a wish to kind of stay young forever, live forever, but the consequence of that is that she's invisible to everybody that she meets, even her own family, and she does live forever, kind of, but she's invisible, and so it just kind of explores that, and I ate this book up. This is one of my 6-star books. It's so good. Like, also, now that I'm thinking about it, I'm like, why is it ranking so low? But it's not. It's so good. I will definitely be rereading this, and I annotated this. It's one of those deep books that makes you think about your life and what's important, and it's just beautiful. So highly recommend. If you haven't read this, like, you need to stop and go read it right now. Okay, number 6 is Anxious People by Frederick Backman. I feel like if I ever wrote a book, it would have to be reminiscent of his writing because it is so unique. It has such a viewpoint, and it's just so good. Anxious People is about everything. That's the best way I can describe it. It is about a bank robber who robs a bank, and then you get to hear about all the hostages, and then it's just so beautifully described. And then at the end of the book, he'll show you, if you trust him, how everybody's life kind of intertwined and how everything relates. And I read it in one afternoon. I was just bawling my eyes out after. It was just so good. So if you're looking for something kind of quirky but really, really good and amazing, Anxious People by Frederick Backman is just a book that stuck with me for the entire year. Number 5 is Shark Heart, and oh my gosh. So fun fact, when I got this book from the library, I only got it so that I could make fun of it, because the premise is about a couple, but the guy gets a terminal diagnosis that he's turning into a great white shark. And so I was like, oh my god, I need to get this book and I need to make fun of it because there's no way in hell that it's gonna be a good book. And I gave it 5 stars and it was phenomenal. It's just one of those quirky books that's not kind of told in a linear way. It's told through different snapshots of their life, and oh my gosh, like, just thinking about that book, I'm gonna cry. I know that the premise of Shark Heart sounds hilarious and just stupid, but you need to trust me on this and you need to go read it because I know you probably haven't, and I don't even know if this book did well because it was such a peculiar kind of thing, but it was just so good. If you're looking for a book about a guy turning into a great white shark, and it's also a love story, it's like, what would you do if the person who you thought was your soulmate would turn into a great white shark? How do you navigate that? That's crazy, but read the book to find out. It was so good. Okay, number 4 is Powerless by Lauren Roberts. This book was everything to me and more. So it's about a society, and if you have powers, you're like good to go, but if you don't have powers, you're shunned from society or killed. So this girl who doesn't have powers is now thrown into a Hunger Games-like situation in front of the entire city where she has to convince them that she has powers. And it's so good. Like, the writing is so good. The tension between the two characters is so good. When I got to the end, I was like, whoa, this book was so good. 10 out of 10, perfect from start to finish. But also, it's one of those books and plot lines where I'm not sure I'm gonna enjoy the second book. And you know what? Not a ton of it was super original, but I didn't mind it because it was just perfect. It was so good. Number 3 is I Fell in Love with Hope by Lancoli. I want to inject this book into my bones. Like, it was just so good, and I know that the ratings for it on Goodreads are not super good, and I understand everything and all the critics and the criticism behind it, but let me tell you this book is about 5 friends and their journey just being in the hospital all the time, and in chronic illnesses and different diseases, and just the life of being sick. And I read this when I was sick and just came out of the hospital for something pretty serious, and I connected with this so much. It felt like it was exactly what I needed to read and exactly what I needed to hear at the time. I ate it up. I recently just annotated another copy for one of my friends, and I hope she doesn't say anything bad about it because I understand the criticism, but it's also so hard because it's just, the writing is so beautiful, and I know that a lot of fundamental parts of this book just don't really make sense, and if I didn't relate to it so much, I probably would not like this book. But because I related to it, it's just so good. And I have gone back and read it and cried and had all these same visceral reactions, and it's just top 10. At first I was gonna put this like number 1, but it's not my number 1, but it's really good. Like probably going on my list of top books of all time. Okay, number 2 is Carrie Soto is Back by Taylor Jenkins Reid. I read this in one day. I read it during the time of my life where I was obsessed with tennis and watching tennis every single day, and I still am obsessed with it, but like that was kind of my beginning journey to being obsessed with tennis. Oh my god, I loved it. And the way that Taylor Jenkins Reid wrote the tennis matches, I was so invested. I was so invested, and it was so good. So this is about Carrie Soto. She was the best women's tennis player. Years later, after she retired, somebody else is about to beat her record, but she is so stubborn that she decided, you know what, I'm gonna go back into tennis and I'm going to beat my record. And she's just so like stubborn, and she's so set in her ways, and I just loved reading about her. She was perfect. Like she was so good, and I know a lot of people don't like her as a main character, but she was everything to me, and she was perfect to me. Carrie Soto is Back, number 2. So good. And now we have come to number 1. I couldn't pick one book in a series. It's a whole series, but I have decided that I would rate any one of these books over all of these books. So it's a series that is number 1, and it is the Magnolia Parks and Daisy Hates series. It is phenomenal. First of all, I read all these books on my Kindle and I loved it so much, and I wanted the original covers because look at how gorgeous they are. But the original covers are not made in the US anymore, so I shipped these to my house from the United Kingdom because that's how crazy I am. I mean, I pre-ordered the next Magnolia Parks book in the original cover, of course. It's just so good. These books are about a rich group of friends in London, and it's Gossip Girl vibes, and the relationships are so toxic, and they're soulmates, but they're also not meant for each other, and it's just a whole lot of miscommunication, which I hate, but it's just so good, and her writing is so good, and it's just so good. Like, I think about these characters every single day. It is also worth it to note that I did reread Throne of Glass at the beginning of this year, but none of those were included because I've already read the whole series like 5 times. But those are like the other characters that I still think about every single day. It's just like I just love the complexities of these characters, all of these characters. I root so hard for them. I just love it. I just love it so much, and it's making me happy just thinking about it. I just love this series so much, and they mean the world to me. All right, there you have it. Those were my top 23 books of 2023. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you tomorrow. Bye.